Welcome back, my little poisoned apples, to Big Bad Fandom, where we bite into cinema with teeth sharper than a huntsman's axe. I'm your hostess with the mostess, Raven Witchwood, here to tell you which films deserve a glass coffin and which ones deserve true love's kiss. Today, we're comparing two films that tried to convince us they're the fairest of them all. The 2012 classic Snow White and The Huntsman versus this year's shiny new Snow White remake. Before we begin, remember to subscribe or I'll send 7 temperamental little men to reorganize your streaming watch lists.
Raven's reviews, they light up the night, witty and bright, like a guiding light. From the screen to the page, she's got no chill. Tune in now for that thrill. TV shows, she dissects with grace.
Chapter 1. Evil Queens and Snowflops. Let's start with the queens, shall we? Because let's be honest, Snow White films are really all about their villains. In one corner, we have Charlize Theron's Queen Ravenna, a complex, traumatized woman consumed by a youth-obsessed patriarchal world. A villain with actual psychological motivation beyond mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the blandest of them all? And in the other corner, we have whatever that 2025 queen was supposed to be. A villain so forgettable, I need to check my notes to remember her motivation. Ah, yes. Being evil. That's it. That was the whole character. And then there's our Snow Whites. Kristen Stewart gave us the I'm going to awkwardly evolve from terrified prisoner to actual battle queen arc we didn't know we needed. Was it perfect? No. Was her accent all over the medieval map? Absolutely. But darlings, she earned her character development like I earn my paychecks, through blood, sweat, and visible discomfort. Meanwhile, 2025's Snow White arrived fully formed with all her character development pre-installed, like she came out of the womb already knowing how to overthrow monarchies. Where's the struggle, honey? Where's the journey? Snow White without the journey is just snow. Chapter 2. Dark Forests versus Pinterest Nightmares. Mirror, mirror on the wall, which film understood visual storytelling at all? Huntsman created a world that felt both magical and brutally real. Dark forests that actually looked scary. Fairy sanctuaries that made you believe in magic. Castle fortresses that screamed taxation without representation. But the 2025 film? So sanitized you could perform surgery on those sets. Every forest looked like it was decorated by a Pinterest board called Enchanted Woodland Wedding Vibes. When your fairy tale looks cleaner than my apartment after my housekeeper's quarterly deep clean, you've missed the point of fairy tales, darling. Chapter 3. Rotten Segment, X-Users versus Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, my little poisoned apples, it's time to bring out the receipts. Because what's better than my opinion? The opinions of strangers on the internet, of course. Let's dive into what the critics and viewers said about Snow White and the Huntsman versus the 2025 Snow White remake on Rotten Tomatoes and beyond. Spoiler alert, these reviews are juicier than the poisoned apple itself. Let's start with Snow White and the Huntsman. It's not perfect, but it's sitting at a respectable 49% on Rotten Tomatoes. For critics, ouch, and a more forgiving 52% audience score. Critics praised the dark, gritty visuals. Charlize Theron's absolutely savage performance as Queen Ravenna, and the bold reimagining of the classic tale. But, and here's the kicker, they dinged it for the story being a little clunky, and Kristen Stewart's less than enthusiastic acting choices. Kristen Stewart's Snow White looks like she's stuck in a perpetual state of confusion. Yeah, okay, fair. But have you ever seen anyone try to overthrow a kingdom while being chased by a magical army? Confusion seems pretty on brand. Meanwhile, the audience had more forgiving takes, like one user saying, "This isn't the Snow White I grew up with." And honestly, thank goodness for that. Ravenna 100% stole the show. And another fan wrote, "The dwarfs were everything. Justice for the dwarfs." See, people get it. It's not about perfection, it's about giving us something with teeth. And Huntsman, it bites. Now, let's move on to Snow White, 2025. Top critics gave it a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yikes. And the all-audience score? Oh, darlings, brace yourselves, 19%. That's lower than some of the dwarfs' heights. Critics called it lifeless and eyesoulless, with one review summing it up as a sanitized, CGI-heavy rehash of a story that deserved more magic and less corporate meddling. And can we talk about the CGI criticism? One critic wrote, "The dwarfs look like Pixar characters who got lost on the way to a better movie." Savage, but accurate. Audience reviews weren't any kinder. One user said, "This movie feels like a Disney Plus special that accidentally wandered into theaters." Or the absolute mic drop of this review: "The only thing poisoned here is my wallet from buying a ticket." I mean, ouch. But let's be fair for a second. Snow White, 2025, did have a few defenders. One user wrote, "It's a fresh, modern take for younger audiences." Okay, sure, but here's the thing, darling. Fairy tales are supposed to be timeless, not trend-chasing. If your movie feels outdated before the credits roll, it's not modern. It's just poorly conceived. So what's the Rotten Tomatoes takeaway? Huntsman may not have won everyone over, but it had ambition, grit, and a queen who could monologue half the cast into submission. Meanwhile, Snow White, 2025, is yet another example of what happens when studios try to polish nostalgia into something marketable but forget to include, a soul. Dwarfs? More like CGI don'ts. Now, let's talk about the dwarfs, a crucial part of any Snow White story. In Snow White and the Huntsman, the dwarfs were fully realized characters with unique personalities, contributing significantly to the plot. They weren't just comic relief, they were warriors and allies, adding depth and heart to the story. In contrast, Snow White, 2025, featured CGI monstrosities that looked like they crawled out of a low-budget video game. While it did include a human actor as one of the thieves, the rest were rendered in such an unappealing way that they lost all charm and personality. The dwarf's essence was compromised, and instead of adding to the narrative, they felt like an afterthought. Oh, and speaking of respect, have you visited bigbadfandom.shop yet? Because if you love my scalding hot takes, you'll love my equally fiery merch. We've just launched our limited edition Snow White shirt. Use code RAVEN for 10% off your first order. Next week, we're tackling that new films, TV shows, and more. Until then, this is Raven Witchwood reminding you that just because something's shiny and new doesn't mean it's better than what came before. Stay critical, my poisoned apples. Seriously though, how do you make a Snow White movie with CGI dwarfs that look like they're auditioning for a failed video game? What's next? A Beauty and the Beast remake without the Beast because he's too problematic? I can't. I just can't.
Raven's reviews, they light up the night, witty and bright, like a guiding light. From the screen to the page, she's got no chill. Tune in now for that thrill. TV shows, she dissects with grace every detail.